There's a common trope in detective or whodunit shows or movies where the investigators are so locked into their theory or trying to figure it out or looking at some clue there that they miss that the person they're looking for is right in front of them, often from the very beginning. Or in one of my favorite family movies as a father with younger kids, in Encanto, there was a hit song a few years ago, We Don't Talk About Bruno. And in that whole scene in the movie, the characters are singing and looking straight forward, and Bruno's just sneaking around behind them. Like, we don't know where Bruno is, and then the audience can see, oh, Bruno's right there. He's walking right behind you. That's kind of like what this John chapter 9 story is like. That we have a very carefully constructed stories that kind of plays out like a detective or like a mystery show or a movie. There's 7 scenes, perhaps like a long play, and in every scene, the same thing keeps happening, that the people with the most knowledge, who are most involved, that should see it, are missing it. And the one with no credentials, who perhaps is not as involved or not in it, can see, oh, it's right there. You're missing it. And it starts with a question. It starts with the disciples asking Jesus, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? I don't read this as the disciples being cruel. I think they're well-intentioned. They're trying to be theological. They're doing what faithful, thoughtful people do, trying to make sense of the suffering that happens around us. And the framework they're working with says suffering has a cause. If someone is ill, that's because someone sinned. And if we can identify the cause, maybe we can manage the pain, we can file it away, and then we can move on with our lives. The one thing the disciples knew, that they knew, was that suffering has a reason. And we, as Presbyterians, and I say this with all the love, are really good at wanting to understand why. And wanting to investigate it, and wanting to theologically fully understand it before we can file it away and move on. We'll form a committee to investigate the why. We'll produce a report on the why. We'll have a congregational meeting about the why. And the report will be thorough, and sometimes it completely misses the point of what actually happened or what we're supposed to do next. I imagine the frustration of the disciples who asked this question. It was definitely to the frustration of our Wednesday Bible study group. Jesus doesn't directly answer the question. He doesn't even engage the framework that the disciples put forth. Jesus replies, neither this man nor his parents sinned. And we can hear that and go, whew, good. As modern readers, we are comfortable with that. And then Jesus continues, he was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him. And now we go, oh, I don't know if I like that so much. Because it can sound pretty harsh. Because if we are sitting here with a chronic illness, or we've watched someone we love suffer, and we hear the rationale being so that God's works might be revealed, it sounds like pain is a prop. It sounds like God is setting us up to make a deeper point, but I don't think that's what Jesus is doing or what he's actually describing here. Instead, what I see Jesus doing, he's completely refusing the entire cause and effect framework of suffering. Not replacing someone sinned with God planned it for this purpose, but slamming the door on the blame game entirely. It's not an explanation. It's what Jesus likes to do when caught with some of these trap-type questions, is he redirects. Going, it's not about why this happened, but I'm here to show you what God is doing right now. I'm here to show you how you can join in and we together can do good. And then Jesus does something strange. And I'll be honest, if I met Jesus, I would hope he wouldn't do this to me. He spits in the dirt, makes mud, and puts it on the guy's eyes. Can you imagine that? Put yourself in the place of the blind man. That a stranger who is having conversation with some other people, again, you can't see, you're hearing voices. They talk about why you're suffering. You're just sitting there. And then suddenly this stuff's being put on your face. Jesus did not ask the man for permission. The man has still not said anything yet at this point in the story. So the stranger, Jesus, puts mud on his face, tells him to go wash in a pool, and the man just goes and does it. Perhaps he's thinking, what else have I got to lose? Perhaps he's thinking, well, I got to get this mud off my face somehow. So he just goes and does it. He washes, he opens his eyes, and for the first time in his life, he can see. There's light. And what follows next, I can only read this as being comedic, and I think that's how John intended it. We have the story, in that, it plays out like a movie or like a play, in that suddenly the question is, well, is this really healed? Is it really the same man? So the neighbors are brought in, and they can't even agree if it's the same guy. That's him. I don't think that. Does he have a brother? But the thing is, transformation is disorienting. It's not just disorienting to us if we're the ones going through it. It's disorienting to the people around us. Because when someone changes, really changes, often the community doesn't really know what to do with it. And they didn't know what to do with it. So what did they do? They called the authorities. And the Pharisees come in. And the Pharisees begin their investigation. Now, I want to be clear, the Pharisees here are not wrong to ask questions. And things they bring up are things that matter. The Sabbath matters. Claims about God require discernment. The instinct is good. It's the same instinct that we have and that we lift up. But there's a difference between asking questions to understand and asking questions to find a reason to dismiss. And the Pharisees are asking questions to find a reason to dismiss, because they've already reached their conclusion about who Jesus is before this even started. Because the one thing that they knew, the one thing that the Pharisees knew, was they knew their set of rules. They knew that it was the Sabbath, and that whatever happened, it happened on the wrong day. And if it happened on the wrong day, that means it happened the wrong way. And if it happened the wrong way, then the person who did it cannot be from God. It's logical, right? The logic is there, but it's also completely blind in itself and its approach. The good instincts calcified, hardened into this closed system, in that they were no longer asking what God was doing. They were asking how they can explain it away so that their system wouldn't have to change or acknowledge any new truths. So they interrogate the man who was blind. They don't like what they hear, so what do? They triangulate. They go, well, we're got to talk to your parents. And they pull the parents in. And for me, this is the most heartbreaking part of the entire story. Because the parents knew what happened. The parents knew that he was their son. But the one thing they knew, the one thing they really knew, was the cost if they said, yes, Jesus did this miraculous thing. Because they knew what it meant to stand opposite of the authorities. They knew who gets put out of the community. It would be them. And their anxiety was so contagious that they couldn't bring themselves to celebrate what Jesus had done for their child who could now see. Instead, all they can say is, he's old enough, ask him. We don't want any part of this. Isn't that heartbreaking? But the Pharisees do go back to the man again. And the tone has shifted from even a pretense of asking questions to being a prosecution. They approach the man saying, give glory to God, not to Jesus, because Jesus is a sinner. And then this formerly blind beggar with no theological training, with no credentials, with no standing, with no role or title, looks at the religious establishment gathered prosecuting him face to face and says, I do not know whether he is a sinner, but one thing I know is I was blind and now I see. The one thing I know. He's following the lead that Jesus set. He's refusing to play their game by their rules. They want a theological debate, and he gives them his testimony. They want an argument, and he shares his experience. He can't out-credential them, but they can't take away from him what happened. And then his courage builds as they keep pressing him. So what did he do? How did he open your eyes? Tell us the story one more time as they're seeking to trip him up. And the guy fires back, I told you and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? And then my favorite line in this story. If you picture the Pharisees interrogating, again, their mind already made up. They're asking, tell us again, tell us again. And the guy says, do you want to become his disciples too? They did not like that. But this guy has guts, right? I have to picture he's living free now. He has a new lease on life. He has every reason to be afraid. He's in a room full of people who hold power over his entire life, but he's just free. He's living. Something's happened to him that's so real, so undeniable, that he can't be bullied out of it. The Pharisees keep asking him to doubt what he knows, and he keeps refusing because the truth is making him more alive every moment. And his theological skill, his theological sight keeps sharpening, coming more into focus. He refers to Jesus as the man called Jesus, and then saying he is a prophet, and then saying he is from God. And with every round of questioning, the man sees more clearly. And with every round of questioning, the Pharisees see less. And when a man won't stop telling the truth, anxious institutions do what they always do. They throw him out. And they throw the man out of their community. And this should be very unsettling for anyone who follows Christ of any day, any place, any age. To hear a story of a religious community, a faithful, well-intentioned religious community using its rules, its process, its authority to exclude someone who God had just blessed. Not out of malice, but out of anxiety. Out of a system that couldn't absorb what it couldn't easily explain. This past week, about 40 to 50 of us have gathered at the different workshops for our Belonging Beyond with Susan. And one of the things we learned is how predictable communities under stress become. As I was sitting in those workshops, knowing that John 9 was approaching and on my mind, the parallels are countless. The Pharisees run the entire playbook that Susan warned us about. They triangulate. They drag in the parents instead of going straight to the man or to Jesus. They scapegoat, saying, you were born in sin. You can't teach us. It's a system that's protecting itself. They listen, but not to understand. They listen to respond. They listen to persecute. As Bishop Stephen Charleston wrote in the article we read for the third workshop, our witness is not to conformity, but to community. Meaning we're not meant to all be the same, but we're meant to still belong together. The Pharisees chose conformity, not community. And that can happen anywhere. It can happen in denominations. It can happen in congregations. It can happen in meetings, big and small. But I'll tell you something. Going back to early in my ministry, so before I was in Illinois, nowhere near Chicago, one thing I knew that was drilled into me is the Book of Order, the founding of our government, our Constitution equivalent, if you will, is printed in black and white, both literally and figuratively. It says what it says. The rules are the rules, and they're good rules, and they serve us well. In school, and when I had to write essays on it, that was fine. But then in actual ministry in a church, when I was the pastor and there was someone who'd been worshiping there for decades, but could not officially join because I'm not got to get into it, but family pressure from a long, long time ago, who would not want him to join a Reformed church, is we found a way that he could maybe join through an affiliate membership. I'm not got to get into the details, but what's important to know is that it would have been kind of gray at best. And I was wrestling with this as a new pastor. I don't know what to do. I can read it. You can maybe interpret it this way. Some people do. You could also interpret it this way. It wouldn't be good for the guy and what he wants to do and be a part of the community. So I called my executive pastor, the pastor to the pastors, and I said, here's the situation. Here's what I'm dealing with. I'm new. Tell me what to do. What do I do? And what he told me stuck with me. He said, you first treat it pastorally. Don't treat it as a lawyer following the book. And if you're got to err on the side of grace. Be pastoral, err on the side of grace. And that's what we did. But I can tell you, it took learning and a lot of conversations for me to get there, and I still regularly need to be reminded of that, just knowing how my brain likes to process things. But one thing that I know now is that rules need to be read often through a lens of grace. Because rules were made to serve the community. Communities aren't made to serve rules. And when we start reading our governance looking for reasons to exclude rather than reasons to include, we may or may not have the book of order right, but we've got the gospel wrong if we're using it as a ways to keep people out. I don't believe or see the Pharisees here as being bad people. I see them as being faithful people whose good instincts calcified into something hard. And the distance between them and us is shorter than we would like it to believe. Because every one of us, myself included, in the right circumstances with enough anxiety in the room, is capable of throwing someone out in the name of faithfulness. But that's not following the gospel. But that's what happened to this man. He's thrown out. He's expelled, which in the first century means he's expelled from the synagogue, expelled from everything, his worship, his community, his social network, his identity. It's gone. He told the truth, and it cost him the only world he knew. Some of you may know what that's like. Maybe not the synagogue part, but the part where you said the true thing and the room went cold. The part where you go, I can't pretend anymore. And the people you thought would stand with you kept their eyes down and wouldn't look you in the face. That's the situation this man was in. He's standing in the street with new eyes but no community around him. And if the story ended there, it may be a realistic to today ending, but that is not the gospel ending. Because Jesus heard they had driven him out, and Jesus went to find him. Jesus found him. It wasn't on accident. The man didn't go looking. Jesus went. Jesus found the man. And that's what I see the heart is in this gospel story. It's not about the mud. The heart of it's not even the miracle. The heart is that Jesus goes after the ones who are cast out. That when the system is finished with you, Jesus is not. That there is a seeking that comes from God's side and finds us in the exact place where we were left. And Jesus asked him a question. Do you believe in the Son of Man? And the man whose vision's getting sharper, who's getting clearer and bolder, answers honestly, I don't know. Who is he? I want to believe in him. Tell me who he is. asking questions, not with the end in mind, but wanting to understand. And Jesus says, you have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he. I think we can glance over that a little too quickly. The man who was blind can now see, and Jesus says, you have seen him. To a man who spent his entire life in darkness, who felt mud on his face and water in his eyes, and for the first time light, who had been poked and prodded and interrogated and then cast out and abandoned, Jesus says, you can now see. You see who everyone else has overlooked. You who they said was born sin. You who they threw out. You who saw what the Pharisees, with all their knowledge and training, what they could not see, you can see. The thing the man knew at the beginning was blindness. Then the one thing he knew was his sight. Then the one thing he knew was his own experience. And he held on to it when everything tried to take it away. And now the one thing he knows is Jesus Christ. And he says, Lord, I believe. I believe. Two of the freest words he has ever spoken. He's not performing. He's not defending himself. He's not building a case in the courtroom. He's free. He's home. After what I can only imagine is the longest day of his life, after the mud and the water and the light and the neighbors and the Pharisees and his parents who wouldn't claim him and the system that threw him out, he's standing in front of Christ and he says, I believe. I'm home. That's abundant life. Being found by Jesus when everything else has been stripped away and discovering that the one thing we need to know has been right in front of us the whole time. We've been doing real work together as a congregation. Surveys and listening sessions and workshops. We've been practicing listening differently. Listening to understand. Practicing staying at the table even if it gets uncomfortable. Learning to be a community where we stand together, not even though we disagree, but because we sometimes disagree. And we don't have it all figured out. No human being or group of people does. But the one thing I know is that God is at work in this place. I've seen it in the Jones room. I've seen it in the sanctuary, in the narthex, in the Sunday school rooms. I've seen it in the way that you all keep showing up, in your willingness to stay together. And this leads us all to Lent, to Ash Wednesday, to a time of prayer and preparation. And here's what I want to invite you into as we begin this season of Lent. I'm not going to ask you to generically give something up, although if you'd like to, go for it. But I will invite you into what this man discovered. That you don't have to have it all figured out to follow Jesus. That you don't have to win every argument or survive the investigation or impress the committee. That the deepest faith in this whole story belongs to a man who couldn't explain a thing, who only knew what happened to him and who was there. So this Lent, I invite you to let yourself live more freely. To be free from the blame game and whodunit, to be free from the need to play detective, to feel free from the pressure to have all the answers before you're allowed to believe. Because the man born blind didn't earn his sight. He received it. He didn't earn Jesus coming to find him. Jesus came anyway. And when Jesus asked him to believe, he said yes. Because I was blind, now I see. Lord, I believe. Amen. Amen.